What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo-yo.
So, big fight announcement. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, Shavkhat Rakhmonov. You know, on paper, this one doesn't look great for Thompson, right? You have Rakhmonov, who's this just absolute destructive force in the 170 division, 100% finish rate, tough up-and-coming prospect. Not a single person has made it the distance with him. And then you have the 40-year-old Stephen Thompson, who somehow seems to defy age. But I think there's actually more than meets the eye with this fight. And really the Jeff Neal fight kind of told the story for me a bit with Shavkhat Rakhmonov. He doesn't move his head a whole lot. He doesn't take his head off the center line as much as I'd like to see. And Stephen Thompson is a sniper from the outside. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I think Wonderboy is going to be able to beat Shavkhat right off the bat, but I do think this fight is a lot closer than the odds makers are making it.
Yeah, they've got Shavkhat as like the 5-1 favorite to win this thing. And, you know, everybody always likes to talk about the UFC having great striker versus grappler matchups. And that happens week in and week out. We're always seeing great grapplers go in there. And we like to, you know, test the theory. Who's better, strikers or grapplers? And it always seems like there's a push and pull, a good game of tug of war going on. But one other thing that the UFC loves to do with their roster is they like to take the young, hungry, brand new lion that seems seemingly invincible, and for Shavkhat it technically is so far, versus one of the older guys who's built his name, who's done a lot of great things for the sport, but almost looks like it's time for him to pass the torch over. And I really do love these matchups a lot because the experienced fighter does give over the torch in a lot of senses. Most of the time when you see these guys, like we just saw Paddy Pimblett get signed to fight Tony Ferguson, that one doesn't look very fun to me. That doesn't seem like it's going to be all that competitive, unfortunately, if you're a Tony Ferg fan. But this one's a little bit different because we've seen Wonderboy Thompson look better than he's ever looked in some of his more recent fights. Now, you have to go back to like Kevin Holland, which was just earlier this year. That was like such a fun fight for Wonderboy, and it only looked like he was turning it up before they had to call the fight and give him the victory. So I really like that Wonderboy is taking this fight. You know, we did get robbed of seeing him fight Michel Pereira last, and that was because of weight, but he did say that he doesn't really want to go in there and fight another wrestler, another grappler that's going to hold him down there and not let him do what Wonderboy does best. He's a fan favorite for a lot of reasons, and people love to watch his style at work. And I think he sees something in the Rakhmonov matchup that maybe the rest of us people that watch the fights and other fighters aren't seeing.
Yeah, and you know, for Wonderboy, it is a bit unfortunate that he does have to win every single fight from here on out if he is to attain his goal, which is to become a UFC champion. At 40 years old, a loss on your record pretty much disqualifies you, and he's very aware of that. He's also aware of the fact that he wants matchups that he feels, as you said, are going to be ones that bring out the best in him, that get the fans out of their seats, so to speak. And I think he's seeing something in Rakhmonov that the odds makers are not factoring in. I think he sees the same thing that I'm seeing, which is when Rakhmonov fought Jeff Neal, a fight that was very close, by the way, a fight that could have gone either way had Rakhmonov not pulled that incredible last-second standing submission. And, you know, then you look at what Wonderboy was able to do to Jeff Neal. Wonderboy absolutely can pick apart a come-forward fighter that doesn't move their head. So I believe Wonderboy, if Shavkhat Rakhmonov is willing to stand and trade with him, will absolutely do that all day long. And I think Wonderboy would win a standing fight against Shavkhat because he's more elusive, he's harder to hit, and he's very good at making you pay for your mistakes, especially if you come forward without moving your head. He's got some really unorthodox kicks. He can land head kicks seemingly from any distance. Normally you need to have, you know, a bit of space between you and your opponent to land a head kick. It seems like Wonderboy could land a head kick in the clinch. I mean, it's truly an amazing thing to watch, and it's something we really don't see in the UFC much anymore. Somebody who's got a real true karate base that's had massive success inside of the Octagon. So I think Shavkhat Rakhmonov in a lot of ways has to break out of his comfort zone a little bit because Shavkhat is an excellent grappler, but he's not like Islam Makhachev. He's not like Khabib, even Khamzat Chimaev more recently, who's just going to come in and shoot doubles and shoot singles and use the cage to get you down and drag you down. Shavkhat Rakhmonov has some incredible trips and, you know, off-balancings that he does, and he does get the fight to the ground, and he's very effective when he gets it there. But he also shows more of a willingness to stand and trade than a lot of those aforementioned guys there. And I think that would be a mistake for him to do against Stephen Thompson. I think he needs to take this fight to the ground, and he needs to do it before Wonderboy starts doing damage on him.
Yeah, I agree. And when you have a perfect finishing rate, and it was just until he got to an uneven number of wins, it was 8 finishes by submission, 8 finishes by knockout. So he's always mixing it up, but you're right. He doesn't really shoot for singles, and he doesn't sell out for the takedown where he's always constantly running in and trying to get the fight to the ground. He usually will get you in a body lock position or get you up against the cage. Like you said, he does some great trips, or somebody will actually change levels and shoot on him, and that's where he can find those reversals and end up on top or end up in a sneaky submission position where he's able to finish the fight there. So I do think he's got to be a little bit more aggressive with his offensive wrestling if he wants to beat Wonderboy and he wants to finish him and keep this whole 100% finishing rate alive. Because I don't really see him beating Wonderboy Thompson via points. And I don't think if he just lets Wonderboy stay at kickboxing range that he's going to have all the success that he needs. But you did make a great point about the head movement. And I want to play devil's advocate on the lack of head movement from Rakhmonov. And I know it's a weird, hill to stand on, but a lot of times when you find a fighter who doesn't move their head often, that can be to their detriment because they're constantly leaving their head in one spot, and then straight ones and twos and great straightforward striking can tend to find their face, especially when a puncher is long and rangy. And Wonderboy is the king of finding his range and being able to execute on it. But one thing that's very dangerous when fighting Wonderboy is dipping too far to one side or the other, because you might go meet one of his heavy kicks, which in my opinion may be his most lethal weapons that he has in his entire vast arsenal of tools. So I think that Rakhmonov is probably not going to be able to turn into Mike Tyson in one fight camp and start moving his head a bunch. But I also think it'd be beneficial to him to not do that as much. And obviously use your head movement and work on your head movement and try to get a little bit better at it when the punches are coming your way. But don't start dipping your way too far one way or the other when you have Wonderboy Thompson against you, because you could walk yourself right into a head kick knockout. We did see what happened when Kamaru Usman slipped a little bit too far out of Leon Edwards' 1-2 punch. He ran right into his kick and lost himself the belt. So I think Wonderboy Thompson is the kind of guy that you do have to have good head movement for, but don't get too drastic with your changes because you could wind up slipping a little bit too far and find yourself in some serious trouble.
Yeah, it's a good point. You might slip the punch and land right into a head kick.
Right,
so, I think that Rakhmonov, conventional wisdom tells us that the younger fighter who's undefeated, that's the massive favorite, is probably going to win. And I'm not prepared to tell you that I think otherwise.
Yeah.
But I do think this fight is very interesting. I think there's a clear path to victory for both men. And I don't think a lot of people are seeing the clear path to victory for Wonderboy. So if I sounded in this video like I'm thinking or I'm going to pick Wonderboy to win, that's not necessarily the case. I haven't quite made my mind up yet. But I certainly think there is a clear path for Stephen Thompson to get his hand raised. It's just a very narrow path. Yeah. But the same can be said for Rakhmonov. I don't think he can stand and have a war with Wonderboy. I think his path is narrow too. I think it's walking Wonderboy down. Wonderboy's really good about working the perimeter, almost like Adesanya, but he has his own style. Mm-hmm. But, when we've seen Adesanya get in trouble before is when he got himself against the cage, and that's where he does get taken down sometimes. That's where he does find himself. When Pereira was able to finish him, it was up against the cage. So Stephen Thompson can run into a bit of the same type of trouble. But I think that all in all, both men have their clear path to victory, and both men really can't stray too much from their game plans if they are to find success. I think the waters are tough to navigate, and each one of them has a very different chart that they have to navigate. But if they both do what they're supposed to do, it's going to make for a very interesting fight.
Yeah, and I think the odds makers have the right guy as the favorite and the right guy as the underdog, just because of age and optics and all sorts of, intangibles that we have to put into factor and we have to bring into the situation. But when you look at it this way, and we talk about game plans, which is generally one of the most important things that you can have. If you can have a good game plan and then you can go execute on that game plan, generally you can get your hand raised. And I think that if Wonderboy goes out and does what Wonderboy does time and time again, he can get his hand raised. Wonderboy is so hard to beat in 3 rounds because he can go out there and just dismantle you from range in the first round, and then he slowed you down a little bit, and now he has you second guessing what you're going to do, especially if you're not a come forward wrestling type. And then by the third round, you're kind of selling out for a finish. You have to go down. You realize you're down on points, and you realize that you're down 2-0 generally against Wonderboy. So now you have to put yourself more at risk, which can lead to you getting cracked. And I love the comparison you made to Adesanya, because people like to look at people like Israel Adesanya and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson as these accumulative strikers that aren't great finishers, like one-punch KO knockouts and stuff like that. And they'd be right to say that to an extent. But we've seen some lethal shots from Wonderboy get landed on people that shut the lights out in one shot. So while I don't see that happening because of Rakhmonov's durability and the fact that he's just such a tough dude after the Jeff Neal fight, you realize you got to throw a ton of bricks at this guy, not just one, to get him out of there. But I do think that Rakhmonov is going to have to adjust his game much more than Wonderboy Thompson is to get his hand raised. I think Rakhmonov would love to go in there and stand and strike with one of the best strikers in the world. But if he wants to keep that undefeated record, keep that 100% finishing rate, he's going to have to switch it up a little bit, be a little bit more offensive with his wrestling, and try to take this fight to the cage, which would then put it on the ground, take Wonderboy away from his best tools, which is his kicks and his strikes when he's standing on the feet. That's probably the clearest path to victory for Rakhmonov. But man, when you can have Wonderboy go in there and do exactly what he does best time and time again, you're talking about a very dangerous striker.
Yeah, I cannot wait for this fight.
Me either.